Funny, like usually when we look up at the night sky, we have this very specific, almost cinematic image of space in our heads.
Oh, yeah. Right.
We think of it as this massive, impossibly silent, freezing void, just, endless stretches of nothing, punctuated by giant burning clouds of gas, dead rocks, and chunks of ice.
Right. Just trillions upon trillions of tons of inanimate, unthinking, dead matter.
Exactly.
And it's almost comforting in a strange way, isn't it?
Yeah.
Viewing the universe as just cold, mechanical stuff floating around. Like, it strictly follows the mathematical laws of physics. Gravity pulls this way, momentum pushes that way.
Yeah, like a giant clockwork machine.
Exactly. It's predictable. It doesn't think, it just is.
Right. But here's where you have to stop and really let your brain chew on something, because there is this mind-bending absolute paradox hiding right in plain sight. When you look at that dead night sky, you are fundamentally made of that exact same stuff. Like the iron pumping through your blood right now, that was forged in the core of a dying star.
Oh, absolutely.
The calcium in your teeth, the carbon forming the cellular structure of your brain. It is all literally just stardust, which means if you follow the logic, somehow, at some point in the deep, unfathomable past, that dead, inanimate matter woke up.
Yes, it did.
It organized itself. It formed a biological computer we call a brain. It opened a pair of eyes. It looked back up at the exact same sky it came from, and it started wondering where it came from.
It is the ultimate cosmic twist, really.
Yeah.
The universe isn't just some physical, empty container that we happen to have been dropped into. We are the universe.
Yeah.
We are literally the universe experiencing itself, feeling its own temperatures, thinking about its own origins. But the question that has haunted philosophers, theologians, and now quantum physicists forever is the mechanism. Like, how?
Exactly.
How does seemingly dead matter suddenly spark into conscious thought? Where is the line between a rock and a mind?
And that incredibly sticky, seemingly impossible question is exactly what we're tearing into today. We are venturing into a really profound intersection on this deep dive.
We really are.
We're going to look at where ancient Indian philosophy crashes headfirst into modern quantum physics and neuroscience.
And we have a phenomenal guide for this journey. We've been diving deep into an incredibly analytical, dense, and frankly brilliant text titled Sakar Brahmavad.
Yeah, which roughly translates to the doctrine of the embodied ultimate reality, right?
Exactly. It was written by Goswami Shyam Manohar, and it is just a masterclass in synthesis.
I have been so completely pumped to talk about this because what Goswami Shyam Manohar does in this text is unpack a very specific school of Vedanta philosophy called Shuddhadvaita.
Or pure non-dualism.
Right. And this framework was originally proposed centuries ago by the philosopher Vallabhacharya. And what absolutely blew my mind reading through these sources is that this ancient framework actually solves the exact same mind versus matter debates that modern scientists are pulling their hair out over right now.
It really does. And what makes this text so compelling is it doesn't just present ancient ideas as, historical artifacts or museum pieces.
Right. It's not just history.
Exactly. It doesn't say, look at what these ancient people used to believe. Instead, it actively weaponizes these ancient logical frameworks to challenge modern scientific assumptions. It takes the fight directly to materialism.
Okay, so before we get into the heavy quantum physics and the nature of reality, I need you to lay some groundwork. Because reading through this, I noticed something fundamentally different about how this text and, Indian philosophy in general handles arguments.
Though the tolerance for contradiction.
Yes, because in the West, we're so used to these winner-take-all philosophical cage matches. Like, if two ideas contradict, one has to be destroyed. But this tradition seems to operate entirely differently. How do they handle completely contradictory ideas without everything just collapsing into chaos?
That's a crucial observation, and it's really the perfect place to start. What's fascinating here is the sheer tolerance for contradiction that is built directly into the DNA of Indian philosophical thought.
Yeah.
You're right. In many Western philosophical traditions, largely inheriting from Aristotle's law of non-contradiction, if two ideas contradict each other, the immediate instinct is a battle of elimination. Idea A is completely true, therefore idea B must be completely false.
Right. It's binary. It's ones and zeros.
Exactly. But Goswami Shyam Manohar points out that Indian philosophical traditions are incredibly tolerant of parallel, often directly opposing viewpoints. They allow them to coexist without demanding immediate execution of the opposing idea.
That's so wild to me.
It is. And the text presents Vedanta not just as some geographically isolated niche philosophy from the East, but as the quintessential representative of this specific mode of thinking. Think of Vedanta as a massive architectural umbrella.
Okay.
It is capable of housing vast, seemingly irreconcilable ideological differences all under one roof, in different rooms, and they all still belong to the same house.
But wait, if you have a house where, like, the people in the East Wing believe the world is an illusion and the people in the West Wing believe the world is entirely real, there has to be a foundation holding the whole structure up, right? What is the common denominator that makes them all Vedanta?
The foundation, the unifying soul of all the different schools of Vedanta, can be boiled down to a single, incredibly potent Sanskrit phrase from the Upanishads.
What's the phrase?
The phrase is ekam evadvityam, which translates to one without a second.
One without a second. So ultimate reality at its absolute base layer is just one single thing.
Yeah.
There is no backup reality. There is no outside force. Just one.
That's it. Every single thinker under the Vedanta umbrella agrees on that fundamental premise. Ultimate reality, often called Brahman, is singular. But, and this is a massive universe size, but while they all agree that ultimate reality is one, they drastically, fiercely differ on how to explain the obvious, messy, chaotic diversity of the universe you and I actually live in.
Because I'm looking out the window right now, and I definitely see more than one thing, right? I see trees, I see cars, I see clouds. I know there are 8 billion human beings. I know there are billions of galaxies. If reality is truly just one single, undivided thing, why does it look like an infinite number of completely different things?
That is the million-dollar question. And the text outlines how different titans of Indian philosophy tried to solve that exact riddle. It gives us a great map of the territory.
Okay, let's look at the map.
Let's start with Shankara. His school of thought is known as Kevaladvaita, which means absolute non-dualism.
Okay, how does Shankara explain the cars and the trees?
Shankara essentially looks at the one and says, the one is the only real thing, period. Therefore, all the diversity we see, the trees, the cars, our individual physical bodies, our separate egos, none of it is actually real.
Wait, really?
Yeah, he says it is a cosmic illusion. The Sanskrit word for this is Maya.
So in Shankara's view, the universe as we experience it is basically a giant cosmic mirage. Or, to use a modern metaphor, we are basically living in the Matrix.
That's a highly accurate modern parallel, actually. Imagine walking through a desert, parched, and you see a shimmering lake of water in the distance.
Right, a mirage.
The lake looks real, it acts like a lake, it bends light like a lake, but when you get there, it's just hot sand. The water never existed, your perception was flawed. Shankara says the entire universe is that mirage. The diversity isn't real. We're just misperceiving the one due to our own ignorance.
Oh, wow. Okay, that is a heavy stance. I imagine not everyone agreed with that.
Oh, they absolutely didn't. Which brings us to another major thinker, Ramanuja. His school is called Vishishtadvaita, or qualified non-dualism.
Qualified non-dualism.
Right. Ramanuja looks at Shankara's mirage theory and says, no, that doesn't work. The world feels too real. It operates on too many consistent rules to just be a hallucination. So Ramanuja argues that the diversity is absolutely real, but it exists as attributes of the one.
Attributes. What does that mean in practice? Like, how does that work?
Think of a single physical apple. It's one object.
Right.
But that one apple has the attribute of being bright red. It has the attribute of being perfectly round. It has the attribute of being sweet to the taste. Redness, roundness, and sweetness are three completely different concepts, but they all exist seamlessly within the unity of the one apple.
Oh, I see.
Ramanuja says the universe and all its diversity are the attributes, the qualities of the one Brahman.
Okay, I like that. It saves the physical world from being totally dismissed. It feels a lot more grounded. But then the text mentions a third guy who goes in a completely different direction.
Right, Madhva. His school is called Dvaita, which is strict dualism.
Dualism.
Madhva basically throws his hands up at the other two and says, you're both overcomplicating this. He argues that the differences we see are absolutely real, eternal, and foundational. God, individual souls, and physical matter are fundamentally, eternally distinct from one another.
So Madhva just abandons the one without a second idea entirely.
Not entirely, no. He still believes there is one supreme controller, God, but the stuff God controls is separate from God. Think of a master clockmaker and a clock. The clockmaker builds the clock, winds the clock, and completely controls the clock. But the clockmaker is not made of gears and springs, and the clock is not made of flesh and blood. They are two different substances. That's Madhva's dualism.
Which finally brings us to the star of our source text and the framework that Goswami Shaya Manohar is using to really challenge modern science, Vallabhacharya.
Yes. Vallabhacharya steps into this massive philosophical arena and proposes Shuddhadvaita, which means pure non-dualism, and this is where the text gets incredibly nuanced and, frankly, daring.
Yeah, I found this part fascinating.
Vallabhacharya looks at the one without a second, and he looks at the diverse physical universe, and he refuses to compromise on either. He argues that the universe is a real manifestation of Brahman, the ultimate reality, and not an illusion at all.
So he rejects Shankar's mirage theory completely.
Entirely. But he also rejects Ramanuja's idea that the universe is just an attribute. Vallabhacharya says the universe is a pure manifestation, meaning the physical world isn't a mistake, it's not a hallucination, and it's not made of some secondary, inferior, or contaminated substance.
Right.
The physical, messy, diverse world is entirely real, and it is entirely made out of that exact same plane, one without a second. The gold ring is still made of solid gold, even if it doesn't look like a solid brick of gold anymore.
Okay, this is where my brain starts hurting a little bit. Because it feels like a total paradox. Like, how can something be absolutely purely one, but also absolutely purely many at the exact same time without it being an illusion?
It's tough to wrap your head around.
It is, but the source text uses this brilliant analogy to explain how contradictory things can actually both be perfectly true, depending on your vantage point.
Oh, the nation analogy.
Yes, let's unpack this because it clicked so perfectly for me. Think about a nation. Let's say India or the United States.
Okay.
If you look at it from a macro geopolitical level, you can point your finger at a globe and say, that is one country. It is a single unified entity. It has one unified constitution, one central identity, one border. From that perspective, you are speaking absolute truth. That is your non-dualism.
Exactly. It's perfectly true.
But if you take a massive zoom lens and zoom down to the street level of that same country, you can look around and say, wait a minute, there are 1 billion different people here. They have different thoughts, they speak different languages, they have different physical bodies, they are pursuing entirely different lives.
Right.
And from that perspective, you are also speaking absolute truth. That is your dualism. The text seems to be asking, are these ancient philosophers essentially just looking at the exact same absolute reality, but refusing to acknowledge that they are just looking through different zoom lenses?
That is a phenomenal way to conceptualize it, and it hits the core of Goswami Shama Manohar's argument.
Yes.
Yes. The text argues that the bitter, centuries-long arguments between these different philosophical schools happen because human minds naturally get attached to one specific zoom lens, and we stubbornly refuse to acknowledge the validity of the others.
We want things to be simple. We want it to be either A or B.
Precisely. If you are terrified of losing the majestic, infinite nature of the one, you get stuck in Shankar's macro lens. And to defend that lens, you have to explain away the many as an illusion, a trick of the light.
Makes sense.
On the flip side, if you are deeply grounded in the physical reality of the many, you get stuck in the micro lens and you end up like Madhva, losing the underlying unified substance of reality entirely. Vallabhacharya's Shuddhadvaita is attempting something incredibly difficult.
What's that?
He is trying to hold both lenses up to the eye at the exact same time. The one has genuinely, miraculously become the many without ever actually losing his oneness.
Okay, so if we accept Vallabhacharya's premise that the one is truly, purely manifesting as the diverse physical universe without losing its oneness, it begs a massive immediate question.
What's the question?
What is the physical universe actually made of then? Like, if this ultimate reality is truly one, how does it relate to the physical stuff we can touch, measure, weigh, and put under a microscope? Because this leads us right into the ultimate clash that the text sets up. Ancient metaphysics going toe-to-toe with modern science.
Yeah, we are stepping right into the mind-matter paradox here. This is a debate that hasn't just fractured ancient Indian philosophy. It has fundamentally fractured Western philosophy, science, and psychology for centuries. The source text brings up the age-old, seemingly unresolvable battle between materialism and idealism.
Right. Let's define those so we are all on the same page. Materialism is essentially the default setting of modern science.
Yes, it is.
It's the idea that everything, literally everything in the cosmos, is ultimately just physical matter. Atoms, molecules, energy fields. Your thoughts, your feelings, your deepest memories, your sensation of consciousness materialist argue they are nothing more than complex chemical reactions and electrical impulses firing off in the meat computer of your brain.
Exactly.
You don't need a soul, you don't need spirit to explain anything. You just need enough time, enough evolution, and enough complex biology.
That is the materialist stronghold. And on the extreme opposite end of the spectrum, you have idealism.
Okay, and what's that?
This is the argument that the fundamental base layer substance of reality is actually mental or spiritual. The physical world, the chairs, the rocks, the stars, only exist because it is being perceived by a conscious mind. In strict idealism, without a conscious observer to process the data, the physical world doesn't truly exist in any meaningful, solid way. Mind creates matter, not the other way around.
It's a complete standoff. And the source text drops this fantastic, slightly cheeky quote from the British philosopher Bertrand Russell to show just how messy and intellectually deadlocked this is in the West.
Oh, I love this quote.
Right. He famously joked, "What is mind? No matter. What is matter? Never mind." It's a funny play on words, but it perfectly highlights how we've completely walled off these two concepts. We treat them like oil and water. They refuse to mix.
And to illustrate how Indian philosophy has historically tackled this exact standoff, Goswami Shyam Manohar brings in a classic, ancient analogy from the Samkhya school of philosophy. It's brilliant in its simplicity.
The forest analogy.
Yes. They describe the functioning of the universe as a forced partnership between two people trapped in a dense forest, a blind man and a lame man.
I really love this analogy. Walk us through how it maps onto mind and matter.
So in this analogy, the blind man represents what they call prakriti, which translates to inanimate physical matter. The blind man has strong legs, he has the raw physical energy, the mass, and the capacity to move, to act, to push things around. But he has absolutely no vision. He has no consciousness, no awareness, no internal direction. If he tries to navigate the forest alone, he's just going to smash into trees and walk off cliffs. He is blind force.
Okay, so that's physical matter. And the lame man.
The lame man represents Purusha, which is pure consciousness or spirit. The lame man can see perfectly. He has a complete awareness, vision, intelligence, and intention. He knows exactly which path leads out of the forest.
Right, but he can't walk.
Exactly. His legs are paralyzed. He has absolutely no physical mass, no energy to move, no capacity to physically interact with the world on his own. He can see the path, but he can't walk it.
So separately, they are both totally doomed.
Exactly. So what do they do to survive? They have to form a symbiosis. The lame man climbs up and sits on the shoulders of the blind man. Now, the blind man provides the movement, the physical action, the interaction with the environment. And the lame man provides the vision, the direction, the conscious intent. Together, operating as a single unified entity, they can successfully navigate the world.
It's an incredible metaphor for the mind-body connection. Like my physical body, my muscles, my vocal cords, my skeleton, that's the blind man. It does the moving.
Right.
My conscious mind, my thoughts, my desires, that's the lame man steering from the shoulders. But the source text doesn't just leave it as a neat ancient metaphor. It actually uses Vallabhacharya's framework to actively, aggressively critique the modern scientific materialist view, doesn't it?
It does, and it does so by attacking the very definition of what modern science considers matter. The text points out a massive, glaring flaw in the traditional materialist argument.
What's the flaw?
Traditional materialism, think Newtonian physics, claims that dead matter is completely passive. It just sits there. It's like a billiard ball sitting on a table, completely inert, waiting to be hit by another billiard ball, and then blindly following the mechanical, mathematical rules of momentum and friction.
Like clockwork. A universe of dead cogs turning other dead cogs.
Exactly. But Goswami Shyam Manohar notes that modern quantum physics has completely irreversibly shattered that clockwork image. Matter, as it turns out, is not passive at all.
Not even a little bit.
Right. When physicists drill down and look at the subatomic level quarks, electrons, photons, they don't see dead billiard balls. They see particles reacting to each other in incredibly dynamic, unpredictable ways. They see particles entangling, meaning the state of one particle instantly affects the state of another particle miles or even light years away, seemingly faster than the speed of light.
Yeah, spooky action at a distance.
Exactly. They see particles exchanging complex information. They see matter shifting its state from a wave of probabilities to a fixed particle, simply based on whether or not it is being observed by a conscious mind.
Right, the famous double slit experiment. The fundamental building blocks of the universe act differently when we look at them. And the text argues that when so-called dead matter starts reacting dynamically, when it starts exchanging information and responding to observation, it starts looking suspiciously like a rudimentary form of consciousness.
That is the exact point of leverage the text uses. If a subatomic particle is knowing what another particle is doing a mile away and reacting to it instantly, can we honestly, scientifically, still call it dead matter?
Probably not.
The rigid line between matter and mind isn't just blurring in philosophy, it is blurring rapidly in the hard science of quantum physics. The materialist claim that matter is unthinking and passive is scientifically outdated.
But conversely, it's important to note the text isn't just cheerleading for the other side. It also issues a really strong warning against extreme idealism, the idea that the physical world is just an illusion or a projection of our minds.
Right, it rejects that too.
Volaba's Shuddhadvaita philosophy is presented as finding this profound, scientifically sound middle ground. The ultimate reality isn't just dead material stuff, and it isn't just floating mental thoughts. It is both simultaneously. The one encompasses both the physical substance, the blind man, and the conscious awareness, the lame man, perfectly woven together at the subatomic level.
Beautifully put, yeah.
Okay, but I have to pause here and play devil's advocate for a second. Let's really push back on this on behalf of a skeptic listening right now.
Let's do it.
The source text acknowledges that modern science is literally mapping the brain as we speak. If I am a neuroscientist, I can hook you up to an fMRI machine. I can ask you to make a complex, logical, moral choice. Or I can show you a picture of a crying child to elicit empathy. Or I can ask you to move your left arm.
Sure.
And while you do that, I can watch specific physical, biological neurons light up and fire electrical chemical signals on a screen. If science is reaching a point where it can explain all our morals, our thoughts, our consciousness, and our free will simply as the output of a highly evolved, genetically programmed biological computer, doesn't that make the whole ancient idea of a soul or a universal consciousness completely obsolete?
That is a very fair point.
Right. Like, why do we need a complex metaphysical explanation involving ultimate reality when a localized biological explanation seems to be working perfectly fine?
That is the ultimate, inescapable modern question. And to the author's credit, the source text meets it head-on. It doesn't shy away from the neuroscience.
Okay, how does it answer it?
To answer it, Goswami Shai Manohar argues that we have to step back and look at the very mechanics of how human beings acquire knowledge in the first place. We have to examine the tool we are using to look at the brain. To do this, the text actually dissects and dismantles the philosophy of one of the most famous Western thinkers in history.
Who's that?
A man who tried to put absolute permanent limits on what the human mind can ever truly know. Immanuel Kant.
Okay, we are getting into some deep epistemological waters here.
Right.
Let's talk about Kant, agnosticism, and knowing the unknowable, because this is where the philosophy stops being abstract and gets very, very real about how you and I perceive the room we're sitting in right now.
Immanuel Kant, an 18th century German philosopher, essentially dropped a nuclear bomb on philosophy when he famously declared that there is a permanent, unbridgeable split in reality. He said there are two distinct worlds. First, there is the world as we perceive it, through our human senses, how things look, smell, sound, and feel. He called this the phenomenon.
The phenomenon, the world of appearances.
Right. And then, completely separate from that, there is the actual objective external reality, the raw universe, as it exists independently of anyone looking at it. He called this the thing in itself, or the noumenon.
Let me make sure I have this right. Because this is basically the realization that every introductory philosophy student has that keeps them up at night.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, if I look at a bright red apple sitting on a table, I naturally assume I am seeing the apple exactly as it is. But Kant points out that I am not actually interacting with the apple itself. I'm just sitting in the dark theater of my skull. Light waves bounce off the apple, they travel through the air, they hit my cornea, they are inverted by my lens, they hit my retina, they are translated into electrical signals, they travel down my optic nerve, and the visual cortex at the back of my brain fundamentally hallucinates the image of a red apple for me. I am not seeing the apple, I am seeing my brain's translation of the apple.
Precisely. You are entirely reliant on your sensory apparatus. And if your apparatus changes, say you are colorblind, or say you are a dog that perceives the world primarily through a vastly different olfactory apparatus, the apple you perceive changes completely.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Kant argued that because our senses rigorously filter, interpret, and actively construct everything we experience, the actual thing in itself, the noumenon, is fundamentally completely unknowable to the human mind.
We can never, ever step outside of our own biology to see the universe as it actually is.
Exactly. This led Kant, and much of Western philosophy after him, to a state of profound philosophical agnosticism. We just have to accept that ultimate reality is permanently locked away inside an impenetrable black box. We can only ever study the outside of the box. We can never know what's inside.
It's a very isolating thought. But the source text makes a fascinating pivot here. It says that modern science, the very same science that maps the brain and gave us the idea that we are just biological computers, actually completely disproves Kant's extreme agnosticism. How does the author argue that science breaks open Kant's locked box?
What's truly brilliant here is the specific mechanism the author points to. Kant assumed that human beings are passive observers of the universe. He thought we just sit here, like a camera on a tripod, passively receiving filtered data from an unknowable external world, unable to cross the barrier.
Right.
But science proves we are not passive at all. We actively interact with, we manipulate, and we literally reshape the raw thing in itself.
Okay, explain the mechanism. How does manipulating it prove we know it?
The text provides incredible examples, starting with the periodic table of elements. Think about a scientist like Mendeleev, who organized the periodic table. He didn't just passively observe the 94 naturally occurring elements and write them down. By looking at the phenomena, the patterns of the elements, scientists were able to deduce the underlying fundamental invisible rules of reality, the noumenon.
They realize that the universe organizes matter by the number of protons in a nucleus.
Exactly. And because they genuinely understood the absolute thing in itself, the mathematical reality of atomic structure, they didn't just stop at observing. They went into laboratories, built massive particle accelerators, and essentially hacked the source code of reality to create entirely new artificial elements and isotopes that do not exist anywhere in nature. Things like technetium or plutonium.
Oh, I see where this is going. If the external world, the thing in itself, was truly an unknowable, permanently locked box, we might be able to guess what's inside, but we would never be able to systematically reach inside the box, rearrange the internal mechanisms, and accurately predict the physical results. The fact that we can engineer reality at the atomic level proves our minds have pierced the veil. The math in our heads directly correlates to the raw physics of the universe.
Exactly. The mind and the external reality are speaking the exact same language. The text gives another profound example related to our biology, touching on the eye example you brought up earlier. The physics of the human eye dictate that the crystalline lens projects the incoming light onto the back of our retina completely upside down and horizontally reversed.
Yes, from a purely physical material standpoint, the data hitting our nervous system is upside down.
But our consciousness, our brain, acting as an active processor, instantly flips the image right side up and corrects it. We don't walk around seeing the sky at our feet.
Thankfully.
Right? The internal mind actively corrects the distorted physical data to match the actual external reality. And it goes even further than our biology. The text points out that human consciousness has actively created instruments that mimic, bypass, and vastly expand our biological senses to interact with the unseen world.
Right, things like X-ray machines, MRIs, electron microscopes, radar, and deep space telescopes.
Kant might argue those are just more filters. But the text argues differently. Take an MRI machine. An MRI doesn't just passively look at the skin of a body. It actively uses massive magnetic fields and radio waves to physically interact with the protons inside the hydrogen atoms deeper than your tissues.
Oh, okay.
It forces those protons to align and then measures the energy they release when they relax. It is a dynamic interaction that allows our mind to map internal structures that biological light-based eyes could never possibly see. We are constantly building technological and mathematical bridges straight across Kant's so-called impenetrable wall.
So if we can do all that, the barrier between our internal consciousness and the external physical reality isn't a solid brick wall at all. It is highly porous. It's more like a semi-permeable membrane or, an interactive interface. The thing in itself is constantly interacting with us, and we are constantly interacting with it, shaping each other.
And that is the crux of the argument. The text concludes that mind and matter are not totally alien substances permanently walled off from one another. They're deeply, intimately connected.
Which brings us to a massive revelation. If science is proving that mind and matter intimately interact, that our consciousness can mathematically understand and physically manipulate the very fabric of reality, then Valapacharya's ancient concept of a unified reality, where mind and matter are just two different expressions of the exact same underlying substance, isn't unscientific nonsense at all.
Not at all.
It's actually a wildly advanced insight that predates quantum mechanics by centuries.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
It provides a cohesive framework where modern science and ancient metaphysics don't have to be enemies. They're just describing the same elephant from different angles.
But that immediately forces us to ask the biggest, most fundamental question of all. If this unified reality isn't just a dead physical particle and it isn't just a floating thought, what is it actually made of? Like, if everything is one, what is the anatomy of the one?
To answer that, we have to look at the specific anatomy of reality according to the Upanishads, which Goswami Shyam Manohar breaks down meticulously in Sakar Brahmavad. The ancient texts define the ultimate reality, Brahman, using three very specific foundational concepts: Sat, Chit, and Ananda.
Okay, we need to spend some serious time here because this is the core engine of the whole philosophy. Let's break these down. What is Sat?
Sat translates to absolute existence. It is the pure, unfiltered isness of reality. It is the raw fact that something exists rather than nothing. And the text clarifies a crucial point here that aligns beautifully with modern relativity. Space, time, and matter aren't separate, independent things that exist within some empty container of a universe. They are simply dimensions or structural expressions of this absolute Sat. If a physical object has mass, if it takes up physical space, if it persists through time, it is doing so because it is expressing Sat.
Okay, so Sat is the foundation of physical reality. What is Chit?
Chit translates to absolute consciousness. But don't just think of it as a human brain thinking about a math problem. It is the fundamental awareness, the intelligence, the knowing aspect of reality. It is the sheer capacity for the universe to experience itself, to process information, to have an internal dimension.
Existence and consciousness. And what is the third pillar, Ananda?
Ananda is translated as absolute bliss. However, the text warns us not to think of this merely as a fleeting human emotion like the happiness you feel when you eat a good slice of pizza or get a promotion at work.
Right, because that fades.
Exactly. Human happiness is always reactive and temporary. Ananda is a fundamental state of utter perfection, absolute completeness, and overflowing dynamic, uncaused joy. It is a state of completely lacking nothing. It is the pure ecstasy of existence.
So, ultimate reality, the single source of everything, is existence, consciousness, and bliss all rolled perfectly into one infinite, undivided thing.
Yes, that is the nature of the one without a second.
But hold on. This creates a massive conceptual problem. How does this perfectly unified, completely blissful, totally conscious, infinite thing become the actual universe we see today? Because let's be honest, when I look out my window at a concrete sidewalk or a pebble, I do not see consciousness, and I certainly do not see absolute bliss.
Yeah, you just see a rock.
Right. I just see dull, dead existence. How does Vallabha explain the gap between the infinite perfection of Brahman and the mundane reality of a rock?
This is perhaps the most brilliant, elegant mechanism presented in the entire text. It explains how one perfect thing becomes a universe of incredibly diverse, sometimes seemingly dead or suffering things, without ever actually changing its fundamental nature or becoming corrupted.
Okay, what's the mechanism?
The answer lies in a cosmic process of concealment, which is called Tirobhava, and manifestation, which is called Avirabhava.
Concealment and manifestation. How does that mechanism work?
Think of Brahman, this ultimate reality of Sat Chit Ananda, as possessing a universal internal volume dial for each of those three traits. By selectively turning these volume dials up or down to deliberately conceal certain traits, Brahman can manifest as entirely different types of reality while still fundamentally remaining made of the exact same stuff.
Okay, let's test this mechanism. Let's run through the categories of reality the text provides. Start with inanimate matter, what the text calls jada, that rock or the concrete sidewalk or a plastic coffee mug. How does the dial system explain the rock?
In inanimate matter, Brahman has completely turned down or deliberately concealed its volume dials for consciousness, which is Chit, and bliss, which is Ananda. They are dialed all the way to 0.
Okay.
Only the dial for existence, Sada, is fully manifested and turned up to 10. The rock exists in space and time. It has mass, but it does not think, and it does not feel joy. But the crucial paradigm-shifting point of Shuddhadvaita is this. The consciousness and the bliss aren't destroyed. They aren't missing. They are just temporarily hidden. The rock is still entirely Sat Chit Ananda, playing a role.
Okay, that explains dead matter. What about us? What about living, breathing, thinking souls, which the text calls jiva?
In a living soul, Brahman has manipulated the dials differently. It has fully manifested its existence. Say you have a physical body that takes up space, and it has manifested its consciousness. Chit, you are self-aware, you can think, you can process complex information.
Right.
But for the human soul, the absolute bliss, Ananda, is largely concealed. The bliss dial is turned way down.
That is Man, that is profoundly, incredibly accurate to the human experience. It perfectly explains why human existence across all cultures and times is so deeply characterized by a frantic, never-ending search for happiness.
It really does.
We are literally built out of a foundational substance that has deliberately hidden its own bliss from us. We constantly feel like something is missing. We suffer from the hedonic treadmill because the Ananda dial has been turned down. We are bliss-seeking missiles because we intuitively remember that we are made of bliss.
That's exactly it. It's a profound psychological insight wrapped in metaphysics. We are hyper-conscious of our own existence, and we are agonizingly aware that the absolute bliss is missing or concealed, leading to suffering and striving.
And what about the final category?
Finally, you have the supreme or Paramatma God, in a sense. In this ultimate state, all three dials, existence, consciousness, and bliss, are fully 100% manifested. Nothing is concealed.
Okay, let's pause and really let the weight of this sink in. According to Goswami Shyam Manohar in this centuries-old text, a mundane rock on the side of the road is fundamentally made of the exact same stuff as your incredibly complex human mind, and it is made of the exact same stuff as the ultimate, infinite, divine reality.
Yes.
The rock is literally just ultimate reality playing an incredibly committed cosmic game of hide and seek. The rock has completely hidden its own ability to think and its own ability to feel ecstatic joy. It has decided, in that specific, localized form, to merely exist.
It is a stunning, deeply unifying, almost poetic vision of the cosmos. Everything from a quasar to a grain of sand to your own heartbeat is Brahman. It's just Brahman in different stages of concealment and manifestation.
It's beautiful, but I have to say, it immediately triggers an even bigger question. The ultimate why. Why would a perfect, blissful, infinite, conscious reality want to hide parts of itself? Why go through the immense trouble of becoming a dumb rock, or worse, a struggling, anxious, heartbroken human being trying to pay rent and find meaning?
Right.
If you were already perfect, why create a universe full of hidden bliss and suffering?
You've just walked right into a philosophical trap that has snared almost every major theological and philosophical system in human history. The text outlines this trap perfectly, and it's a dilemma that atheists often use to dismantle the idea of a creator.
Okay, what's the trap?
The trap works like this. If the creator made the universe for a specific purpose, say, to be loved by humans, or to test souls to see who is worthy, or to fix some cosmic imbalance, then it logically means the creator lacked something before the universe existed. The creator had a need. And if the creator lacks something or has a need, the creator is, by definition, not infinite and not perfect.
Right. If God needs me to love him so he can feel good, then God is insecure and imperfect.
Exactly. But if you try to escape that side of the trap, you run into the other side. If the universe was created for absolutely no purpose whatsoever, if the creator didn't need anything and just created it for zero reason, then the creator's acting senselessly. It's like a madman randomly throwing paint at a wall with no intention.
Yeah, that doesn't work either.
So theology is stuck. Either ultimate reality is imperfect and needy, or it is senseless, chaotic, and irrational.
So how does Sakar Brahmavad manage to escape the trap? Because both of those options sound terrible.
The resolution offered by the text is the profoundly beautiful concept of Leela.
Leela, what does that mean?
Leela translates directly to divine sport, or cosmic play. To explain how this escapes the trap of purpose versus senselessness, the text uses a highly relatable analogy. Imagine observing two different people playing a sport, like tennis. The first person is a high-level professional athlete. The second person is just someone playing purely for fun on a sunny Sunday afternoon.
Okay, I'm picturing them.
The professional athlete is playing for a very specific purpose. They have a need. They need to win to earn prize money. They need to pay their mortgage. They need to satisfy their sponsors. They need to protect their ego and ranking. Their play is entirely need-driven and purpose-oriented. It is work.
Right.
But the amateur playing on Sunday, they don't need the prize money. They aren't trying to fix a lack in their life. But crucially, you also wouldn't look at them and say their play is senseless or that they are a madman.
Right. They are playing just because playing feels good?
Exactly. Playing for the sheer joy of the game has its own intrinsic self-contained value. It exists in a third category that is neither need-driven purpose nor chaotic senselessness. The text argues that Brahman manifests the entire universe, creates the galaxies, the rocks, the human souls, the entire drama of history, simply out of the overflowing, dynamic, ecstatic nature of its own bliss. It's Ananda.
Wow.
It's not a job. It's a cosmic dance. Brahman is playing an infinite game of hide-and-seek with itself, exploring every possible permutation of existence just for the sheer joy of the play.
So to experience the joy of finding itself, it first has to deliberately hide itself from itself. It has to create the illusion of separation. That is mind-blowing. But the text acknowledges that to actually pull off this cosmic game, to make the illusion convincing, Brahman has to do something that completely breaks the human brain, right?
Yes. And this leads to the ultimate paradox of the entire philosophy. To play this game, to be both the perfect one and the flawed, diverse nacular, Brahman must possess a capacity that completely defies Aristotelian human logic. The text introduces a complex Sanskrit term, Viruddha Dharma Ashriyata.
Let's break that mouthful down. What does Viruddha Dharma Ashriyata mean?
It translates literally to the capacity to harbor entirely contradictory qualities simultaneously. Goswami Shyam Manohar quotes the great philosopher Shankara here, who described Brahman as an impenetrable fortress that mere logicians can never conquer.
Why logicians?
Because human logic operates entirely on binary contradictions, the law of non-contradiction. A thing cannot be both hot and cold at the exact same time in the same way. It cannot be near and far. It cannot be moving and completely still. It cannot be microscopically tiny and universally huge.
It's the basic operating system of our brains. If A is true, opposite A must be false.
Exactly. But the text argues that Brahman, because it is infinite, is not bound by the limitations of the human brain's operating system. Brahman holds all contradictory properties simultaneously. It is smaller than the smallest subatomic particle, yet it envelops the entire cosmos. It is completely, eternally still and unchanging, yet it is furiously moving and morphing into every form in the universe. Our binary logic simply breaks down and shorts out when trying to comprehend the true nature of the infinite.
It's like trying to run modern software on a computer from the 1980s. The hardware just can't process the paradox. I want to use an analogy directly from the source text to make this concept of Viruddha Dharma Ashriyata concrete for you, because it really helped me visualize how contradictions can exist as one.
Go for it.
Think about the ocean in the dead of winter. Imagine standing on a frozen shore looking out at the water. Near the shore, you see massive, solid chunks of ice floating on the surface.
Okay, a frozen ocean.
Now, if you just look at the surface using your basic everyday logic, you see a strict binary. The ice chunks look completely separate from the water and from each other. They have distinct, jagged shapes. They feel rock hard to the touch while the water feels liquid and yielding. They seem like independent, autonomous objects bumping into each other. If you are a logician, you say, ice is solid, water is liquid. They have completely contradictory properties. Therefore, ice is not water.
The perfect logical binary.
Right. But what happens if you take a drill and bore a hole straight down through the center of that solid ice chunk? What do you find? You just find ocean water. The freezing of the ice on the surface doesn't corrupt or alter the essential H2O nature of the water beneath it. And when the ice eventually melts, it doesn't destroy the ocean, it just returns to it.
Yes.
The text points out that the ice and the ocean are simultaneously perfectly identical in their fundamental substance, yet they are completely undeniably different in their localized form and physical behavior. The ice is just the ocean expressing a localized temporary property. It holds the contradiction effortlessly.
That is the absolute essence of Viruddha Dharma Ashriyata. It's a brilliant way to visualize it. We, you, me, the trees, the stars, we are the ice chunks. We spend our lives looking around thinking we are entirely separate, independent, solid entities floating in a void, completely divorced from the ocean. We feel different from each other, but in reality, we are just localized, temporarily frozen expressions of the exact same underlying ocean of Sach and Nanda.
Okay, but if we take that analogy seriously, it leads us down a very dark existential rabbit hole. I need to push back here.
Sure.
If I am just ice on the ocean of this ultimate reality, if my entire existence is just a localized expression of Brahman playing a cosmic game of hide and seek with itself, how much free will do I actually have? Because right now I feel like I am making the autonomous choice to speak into this microphone. Am I actually controlling my actions, or is the ocean controlling me? Am I a real person making choices, or is Brahman just playing a puppet game through my vocal cords?
That is the terrifying logical next step. And the text dives incredibly deep into the psychology and physiology of exactly this question. We are moving into the concept of the illusion of independence. To untangle this, Goswami Shyam Manohar outlines a profound philosophical distinction between two ways we interact with the world: action, which in Sanskrit is karma, and knowledge, which is jnana.
Okay, how does the text differentiate between my actions and my knowledge?
Usually in our day-to-day lives, we assume that action or karma is what the text calls Purusha Tantra. This means it is entirely dependent on the human will. It is subjective. Think about it. If you want to raise your hand right now, you can freely choose to do it. You can choose not to do it. Or you can choose to do it differently. You can raise it halfway or wave it around. Your internal independent will dictates the physical action. You are the master of the action.
Okay, that makes total sense. I feel in control of my arm. And what about knowledge?
And knowledge, or jnana, on the other hand, is categorized as vastu tantra, meaning it is fundamentally dependent on the object itself, not your will. It is objective.
Okay, give me an example.
If you open your eyes and look at that bright red apple sitting on the table, you cannot simply use your willpower to choose to see it as a blue banana. You can't force yourself to know it as something it isn't. The physical reality of the object completely dictates your knowledge of it. Your free will is powerless against the physical fact of the apple's redness.
All right, so action feels like pure free will, and knowledge feels like reality forcing itself upon us. That seems like a pretty straightforward, clean dividing line. Where's the illusion?
The illusion appears when the text completely dismantles that clean dividing line. The author points out that our own biology, the very physical body we inhabit, actively blurs the boundary between what we control and what controls us. He brings in some fascinating physiological examples to prove that action is absolutely not always dependent on our human will.
What kind of biological example?
Think about autonomic bodily functions. Think about the violent act of shivering when you were stuck outside freezing in the snow. Think about your body violently tossing and turning in your sleep when your muscles cramp. Think about the intense physical action of vomiting when you've eaten food with toxic bacteria.
Oh, wow. Yeah, those are undeniably intense physical actions. My body is expending massive amounts of energy to do them, but I am absolutely 100% not choosing to do them. In fact, if I'm shivering or vomiting, I'm usually using every ounce of my conscious willpower to try and stop doing it, and I fail completely. My body overrides my will.
Exactly. These are massive, complex physical actions of your own body, yet they happen entirely without your conscious will, your sankalpa. They happen to you. So the boundary between what you control, your free will, and what controls you, a forced action, is already incredibly porous and compromised within the boundaries of your own skin.
Wow.
You aren't even the undisputed master of your own meat suit. The text argues that this biological reality points to a much deeper metaphysical reality, the existence of an inner controller, which in Sanskrit is called the antaryami.
The inner controller, that sounds ominous. Who or what is that?
The text proposes that this inner controller, this antaryami, is the localized presence of Brahman itself, governing all things from the inside out. We observe the physical world, we see a river flowing downhill, we see a fire burning wood, or we even observe our own internal minds making a seemingly spontaneous decision about what to eat for lunch, and we mistakenly think these things are self-automated or independently willed.
Right.
We think the river flows simply because of blind gravity, and we think we chose the turkey sandwich simply because we were hungry.
But the text says that's an illusion. The gravity and the hunger aren't the root causes.
It says that in absolute reality, the supreme consciousness, the antaryami, is the actual force acting from within all of these forms. It is the ocean moving the ice. We, as localized fragments, are given the deeply convincing illusion of total, isolated independence. We are made to feel like we are the authors of our actions so that the cosmic play, the Leela of the universe, can actually function.
Wait, why is the illusion necessary for the play?
Think of a stage play, like Shakespeare. If every actor on the stage suddenly sobbed, broke character, looked at the audience, and loudly realized they were just playing a part and the drama wasn't real, the play would instantly collapse.
Yeah, that would ruin it.
Exactly. The drama, the tension, the joy of the performance requires the actors to fully commit to the illusion of their separate roles. The illusion of separateness is necessary for the cosmic game of hide and seek to be played out.
Okay, if you're listening to this and wondering what I'm wondering, this is where the existential dread kicks in hard. I have to step in and ask the most grounded, relatable question possible. What does this all mean for me waking up tomorrow morning? If this inner controller is truly pulling the strings from the inside out, am I just a puppet? Is my entire life, my struggles, my painful heartbreak, my career achievements, the moral choices I agonize over, is it all just a rigged, predetermined game where I have absolutely no actual agency? Because that is a profoundly depressing thought.
It is a terrifying, paralyzing thought. If you look at it exclusively through the lens of a separate, isolated ego, if you still believe you are just a disconnected chunk of ice, then yes, the idea of an unseen ocean pushing you around feels like a violation. It feels like you are a puppet manipulated by some distant, invisible puppet master in the sky.
What do you mean?
But the text clarifies this beautifully, and it requires you to remember the core premise of Vallabhacharya's philosophy, pure non-dualism. You cannot think dualistically here. You are not separate from the puppet master.
Because I am the ocean, not just the ice.
Exactly. It's not about being a victim of fate. It's about realizing that the raw energy driving your free will, the very spark of consciousness that allows you to deliberate and make choices, is fundamentally the exact same energy driving the entire cosmos. Your consciousness is not a separate thing being bullied by God. It is a localized, concentrated manifestation of God's consciousness. You have free will, absolutely, but is the universe's free will operating through your specific localized coordinates in space and time. When you genuinely choose something, it is the universe choosing it. You are the universe in motion.
That is a massive paradigm shift. Which brings us to the ultimate realization, the so what of this entire philosophical journey. If we actually internalize this, if we don't just understand it intellectually, but deeply feel this interconnectedness in our bones, how does it change the way we live our daily mundane lives?
Right.
We've covered a staggering amount of ground today. We started with the sheer tolerance of Indian philosophy, its ability to hold contradictions. We looked at how modern quantum physics and neuroscience actually challenge strict, dead materialism. We saw how science disproves Kant's impenetrable wall between the mind and reality.
We examined the very anatomy of existence, Sat, Chit, and Ananda. We saw how the universe is just ultimate reality playing a cosmic game of Leela, hiding its bliss to form the physical world. And we confronted the terrifying, yet ultimately liberating idea of the inner controller.
So bring it home for us. What is the practical, everyday application of all this heavy philosophy? How does reading Sakar Brahmavad change a person?
Goswami Shyam Manohar builds the entire text toward a dual conclusion regarding its relevance for daily life. It centers on two deeply intertwined Sanskrit concepts: Mahatmya, which means the greatness or the majesty of the universe, and Tadatmya, which means identity or inseparable connection.
Greatness and identity. How do they work together?
The author presents a stark contrast. He argues that if you view the universe strictly through the lens of modern materialism, if you genuinely believe the universe is merely a collection of dead, unthinking matter, where isolated biological meat machines are violently competing for scarce resources in a cold, meaningless void, you are mathematically guaranteed to live your entire life in a state of baseline anxiety, fear, and existential dread.
Which, let's be honest, accurately describes how a huge portion of the modern world feels every single day. We are chronically anxious.
Yes. The text literally calls this materialist worldview entering into blind darkness. If you think you are just a temporary biological accident, you will always be terrified of losing what little you have accumulated. You will constantly feel the need to defend your isolated ego against a hostile universe. And ultimately, you will be paralyzed by the terror of death. Because in a purely materialist framework, death means the absolute total annihilation of your isolated self.
Total blackout. Game over.
Precisely. But the text offers an alternative. If you can shift your lens, if you can begin to see the Mahatmya, the breathtaking greatness of the universe, not as dead matter, but as an expression of the ultimate reality's overflowing dynamic joy. And critically, if you can realize your own Tadatmya, your inseparable identity with that exact same ultimate reality, that existential dread completely vanishes. It evaporates.
Because you realize you can't actually be destroyed.
Right. You overcome the fundamental fear of mortality. When the chunk of ice melts in the spring sun, it doesn't die. It isn't annihilated. It just loses its temporary rigid boundary and remembers that it was the vast ocean all along. Recognizing this deep interconnectedness doesn't turn you into a passive, nihilistic puppet who stops caring about life. It does the exact opposite. It frees you from the crippling, heavy anxiety of separation. You realize that your life, with all its mundane ups and downs, your struggles, your joys, your heartbreaks, it is all a vital, conscious, necessary part of the infinite universe experiencing the thrill of its own grand play.
That is incredibly powerful. It recontextualizes everything. To wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final, slightly provocative thought to chew on as you go about the rest of your day. It builds right on this idea of profound identity. In unpacking these ancient concepts, the source text mentions a startling, almost cryptic phrase to summarize this ultimate unity. It says that ultimately the eater and the eaten are one.
The eater and the eaten, that is a stark image.
It is. It strips away all the illusions of separation. So try this. The next time you are observing something out in the world, whether you are looking at a quiet tree in a park, or you are staring at the complex engineering of your smartphone, or even if you are having a deeply frustrating, heated argument with another person, take 1 second to stop. Pull back the zoom lens and ask yourself, Am I just looking at two entirely separate, isolated physical objects bumping into each other in a cold, dead void? Or is this moment just the universe creating a highly localized, temporary illusion of separateness, just so it has a dramatic, beautiful way to look at itself, to challenge itself, and to experience itself?
Are you just the Stardust finally looking back at the Stardust?
Exactly. The next time you look up at the night sky at all that supposedly inanimate matter, remember that the universe isn't just out there, floating in the dark. It is looking right out of your own eyes.